TellyCast, the TV industry news review.
Hi, I'm Justin Crosby, and welcome to the last episode of this season of TellyCast. And we're better to end our third season than Cannes. But this time, we're here for the Cannes Lions Festival of Creativity, where the world's biggest media brands and advertising agencies have decamped on the Croisette in impressive numbers and with even more impressive stands, installations and mega yachts to woo clients, talk strategy and drink rosé in the sun. My guests this week helping me make sense of Cannes Lions from a content industry perspective are Julian Newby and Andy Fry from the Cannes Lions Daily magazine, and Alex Morris, director of LADstudios at LADbible. It's all coming up on this week's TellyCast. So for the last episode in this season of TellyCast, we're here in Cannes, but this time it's for Cannes Lions. So it's the first time I've been here, and it's been a real eye-opener. And I'm here with Julian Newby and Andy Fry, who are the leaders of the editorial team that many of our listeners know for MIPCOM and MIPTV dailies and many others. I thought they were the perfect people to talk about what's happening this week and what the relevance is for the TV industry. And maybe you guys can give us a little bit of a rundown and a review of Cannes Lions and a bit of context of what's going on. Welcome to the show, Julian and Andy.
Thank you.
Yeah, hi. It's nice to be here.
First of all, it's hot. It's been pretty hot all week, hasn't it? There's a few downpours. It feels about 90 degrees. Lots of people wearing shorts. Bit of a younger crowd, maybe, than the traditional TV industry audience. Julian, give us a sense of the scale of the event in terms of numbers and, you know, what sort of activations have been going on with all the... who's here, basically? What sort of brands are here? And what does the event look like?
Who's here? There are about 11,000 people registered. Now, at all events like the film festival, MIPCOM, MIPTV, there will be peripheral people. There'll be people who are visiting for a day and so on. So those numbers could go up. But I'd say in terms of registered people, they're probably about 11,000. And the purpose of the Lions, historically, was to be the Cannes Film Festival of advertising. So we have competitions, we have juries, we have awards, and we have award ceremonies. They're the Oscars of advertising, maybe. But you don't just have one Oscars ceremony, you have 4 here. And within each of those award ceremonies, they're giving out prizes in lots of different categories. It always builds up to the big film category, which is tonight. And film has always traditionally been the sort of strongest, best-known form of advertising. And the film winner is always like the big star.
So that's like the ad of the year, if you like.
Exactly. Alongside that, so this is traditional Lions, alongside that you have a conference program where CEOs of agencies, increasingly celebrities, actors, politicians, activists, will show up and speak. And it's on a level, some of them are on a level with TED Talks. We've had the Reverend Jesse Jackson here, we've had President Clinton here, we have Malala here this week. So you get people talking a lot about world issues and so on. And then you'll have the more corporate events where CEOs and others from advertising agencies will talk, and also people from the brand, representing the brands. So that's, I guess, what I've just described there is what happens in the Palais. But then, of course, there's stuff that goes on down in the beaches, which is slightly, well, it may have been called fringe back in the day, but it's huge now. You've got Meta, you've got Google, you've got Amazon, and they're building huge compounds, if you like, where they can invite people and hold their own conferences, panels, parties. I mean, this is a great place if you're a DJ. I mean, there's big money here now. That's a new development. That's probably been going on for the last 10 years. Other than that, it's Cannes as usual. Restaurants, hotels, parties, and all the rest.
I arrived here this week. We're recording this on Friday, by the way, which is the last day of the Cannes Lions. And the first thing that sort of struck me is that those activations, if you like, those beach structures are all the way down to the Martinez, all the way up to the Palais and around the Palais. You've got, it's almost like a festival stage on the Spotify beach area, and they've had, I think, Kylie Minogue and Kendrick Lamar and lots of other major artists here. So, Andy, tell us a little bit about the conference program then, and what are the sort of key themes that you've pulled out of what a lot of these CEOs, but also other leaders, have been talking about? Because the week kicked off with President Zelensky, didn't it? The Ukrainian president talking about why ideas are so important.
Yeah, I think it's important not to lose sight that although the event takes over the entirety of Cannes, the real beating heart, the engine room, is the Palais. There's the work in the basement. So a lot of creative, senior officers will say that that's where they spend their time, looking at the work, getting ideas. But the conference program itself is really diverse. I mean, it's important to get an idea that all of the big brands are here. So Nike, MasterCard, McDonald's, Coke, they're all up on stage telling you all about their plans for the coming year. The creative marketer of the year this year is AB InBev, which is the biggest brewer in the world, 28% market share. So you get some really interesting insights. So when you go to those sessions, they're really trying to unpack now how they communicate with audiences. They're trying to work out, in this really complex, fragmented world, how do they make those connections with audiences that, as you know, are not that interested in big spot ads anymore. They flick through them. But in addition to that, everybody here is really trying to push the idea that they're creative. Although it's advertising agencies and brands, the message they want to get across is that they're creative. So they push the envelope. So they push the envelope in terms of social purpose. They push the envelope in terms of diversity, inclusion. They're really looking to stretch themselves. So they're not here talking about how they get an extra 0.5% share in their crisp market. They're talking about how they take their ideas to the next level. So it's actually really quite thought-provoking. In terms of the kind of themes, I think social purpose, doing good, has been a big one. But it's moved on slightly because we're in the middle of a cost of living crisis. People are not just looking to do good, they're looking to do good at the same time that they grow their businesses. So I'd say a subtle shift in message this week has been that we need to grow our businesses in order to do good. So we're not just here to do good. Equally, we're not just here to be creative, we're here to be creatively effective. So it's not enough just to come up with a great idea, that idea has to deliver results. So I think there's a hard-headedness about it this year, which is, we're back after the pandemic, we're all glad to be back, we're all hugging, we're reuniting, it's great. But if you're creative, you've got to be effective. And if you do good, you've also got to grow.
Yeah, and I think that's something that I've picked up in a couple of sessions that I've been in terms of consumer behaviour and how that's changed just over the past 2-3 years with the pandemic. And now we're coming, as you say, out of the pandemic. Many industries are at pre-pandemic levels, but now we're faced with hugely rising inflation. Talking about, we're seeing industrial action happening all around Europe. And we're seeing consumers obviously making different choices now because they're having to look at what subscription services maybe they've got and how they can maybe cut things out of their life. So for marketers looking to influence those audiences, they're going to have to work harder and really make themselves as relevant as possible.
I think it was very interesting that Ted Sarandos was here, the Netflix CEO, because that business model for so long was based on free subscription membership. Why is he here? He's introducing an advertising model. Why is he introducing an advertising model? Because people are making choices now. Do I keep my Netflix or my Amazon, and so on and so on? And it was kind of the thing, I would say 3-4 years ago, you would never have dreamed of the idea of Netflix having advertising. So the fact that he came here to meet this community speaks volumes. And I think it speaks volumes about the power of this event as well. Not just the power of Netflix, but the power of this event. And you mentioned Zelensky. That was a session introducing and giving space and visibility to Ukrainian creatives. So that, while we're all devastated about the war and devastation and murder and stuff, people are trying to keep alive the idea that it's a country with people who do things. Ukrainian creators were on parade, and then Zelensky addressed the room via video, and he was pleading with brands to use their power to help to solve the problems that his country is facing. And he wasn't the only one here. There are a lot of people with causes who are here to appeal to brands to try to engage their strength and power and visibility to help change the world. There was another group here called Change the Ref, run by a guy whose son was killed in a school shooting. I mean, he's doing it actually today. He will be pleading with brands to take on this cause and to depoliticize it, because it becomes binary. You know, Republicans want guns, Democrats don't. You've got to rise above that, and brands can do that because they have the power. So that's his plea. And there are a lot of other people with causes who are asking brands to do the same thing. Nike did it with Black Lives Matter a few years ago, and this guy on the gun laws thing, he's just saying we just need one Nike, and it will turn that from being a binary political issue to being a humanitarian issue.
You're right. I mean, there are, forgive the phrase, but like the masters of the universe are all here when it comes to those decision makers. The most powerful brands in the world are all gathered in one place. And as you say, Netflix is not the biggest company here, which is quite a shift in mindset when you come here and consider that. We'll come and talk a little bit about corporate social responsibility in a second. So the attendees here, we've got brands, we've talked about brands and marketeers are here, but we've got lots of advertising agencies, but also we have the media agencies. And these are the guys with the money that are really funding a lot of the content within the TV and the content industry. What are the main announcements that have been made here this week, Andy, that you can tell us about when it comes to brands and media agencies that have really sort of caught your eye?
I'm not convinced people announce stuff very much. They tend to reflect on work they've done, and they give you a sense of where they're going, but there's no big reveals. But I would say that what you tend to get is a lot of self-reflection on where these companies are now and where they want to be. So, I mean, I've seen a number of brands stand up this week and say, we've been getting it wrong and we need to change radically. So MasterCard, for example. MasterCard basically stood at, the senior marketers stood on stage and said that 70% of CEOs don't believe that their marketing works or that their agencies are delivering anything through marketing. And then you had Coke on stage talking about completely dismantling its existing structure and changing it. So what they're really talking about is shifting away from that TV-led model, the TV advertising-led model, to something more experiential, something that cuts right across a whole series of different media. So I think that's been possibly the big theme. So they're getting into content. So you'll see a lot of smaller announcements where Coke, for example, talked about Coke Studio being one of their big rollouts of the week. This is basically a music-led strategy, but it has Coke behind it. So it's heavily Coke branded, but it's meant to entertain at the same time. MasterCard spent an hour talking about how they've launched a fragrance brand, they've launched an album, and what they're doing is they're trying to create new touch points, new ways of connecting with people that they haven't attempted in the past. So I think that kind of thing, rather than the big headline announcements, I think Jules might have an idea of big announcement.
Yes, I was thinking it wasn't so much an announcement, as you said, it's more that they bring their experiences to the table to talk to other people about how they're changing the game. We were talking earlier, I found fascinating the fact that Hyundai, the car people, wanted a big splash for a new model. They were thinking at the time, do we just want another big Super Bowl thing done by a famous ad director, etc., and it reaches 13 million or 13 billion? So what they did is they went straight to Disney and tried to engage with some of their global TV brands, film brands actually, and specifically Marvel. And to tell that, so they engaged with Disney, they created branded content, and it involved huge names, and one of them came down to sort of illustrate what they'd done, and that was Elizabeth Olsen, who is Wanda in the Marvel franchises. And she was on stage, she was fantastic, but she was saying to the audiences, I've done this, I've done that, but I've never been involved in a big ad like this, and I only just realised the power of this in terms of how it promotes my work. So it wasn't just promoting a car, it was promoting her, it was promoting WandaVision, and going more broadly into the Marvel franchises as well, the Marvel world. That was a brand taking a completely different direction. and then engaging TV people. And that, I think, for your audience, for this particular podcast, I think that's what they would like to maybe be thinking about, because we had Paris Hilton here. Now, she was, The Simple Life, that was one of her shows, but she was here to talk about her NFT company. And television maybe doesn't always sort of take their, if you call a star a brand, take their leading names, leading faces, and look to what else they do, and look to how they can take the TV message somewhere else. Issa Rae, who started with her own her own YouTube show, and then a YouTube channel, and then of course that commuted to HBO, and now she was down here promoting various things, but also talking about diversity and women in media and so on. So there's another TV icon who down here can expand her meaning and her purpose, because she's talking to so many different groups, brands, agencies and creatives and so on. So I think a message from the Lions to TV is consider more, possibly, the value and the power of the people who make your programs, who star in your programs, but can do other things, which of course can go out into the world and then bring revenues back.
Yeah, no, that's really fascinating. The ways that brands are looking to communicate with those audiences. Back to a point you made earlier on, Andy, is that these brands are getting more and more into content, aren't they? They're realizing that TV ads, seems to me, I've known for a while that I don't watch TV ads. I skip through them. I pre-record everything or I stream it, other than YouTube, obviously, and Google, obviously, are here in force as well. But it's about that, brands really looking into content, creating their own content. There must be a huge opportunity then, and this is something we've covered quite a lot on TellyCast before, in terms of brand-funded programming and ways that producers and content companies, but also platforms, can access this money, because there is a lot of money out there in this particular sector. I refer everybody back to Evan Shapiro's fantastic diagrams on the Death Stars that actually show the size and scale of businesses like Meta, like Google, like Amazon, compared to what we think as really big media businesses. So also that's an opportunity, isn't it, Andy, in terms of TV businesses, like, likes of commercial broadcasters, but also producers, to create more content for brands and help brands communicate with their consumers.
Yeah, they should certainly look to this event to learn. I think sometimes they get constrained by the idea that when they make branded content, they need to do it within the context of broadcasters. So they'll go to ITV or Channel 4 and they'll try and work on an idea within a very tightly controlled regulatory environment. Now, what they can do is they can break out into the internet, where actually it's a lot freer. So an example of a really strong performer this week, something that will have won a big award by the time the show comes out, is Apple. They made a piece called Escape from the Office. And it's an 8-minute piece that was made by a commercial production company. So it's not a TV production company, it's a commercial production company. It's an 8-minute piece. I watched it last night. It's a really funny webisode about 4 people working in an office that they hate, and they decide they're going to launch their own company. So these characters, they go off and they launch their own packaging company, and there's a self-deprecating humor about the fact that it's packaging. They're trying to make a better, bag. That's what they're trying to do, and they hate their boss. But all the way through the 8 minutes, they're using Apple products, but not in a really intrusive, invasive way. They're just telling their story of their company. It's very funny, and there are Apple products in the background. That goes out on online channels. So, for a TV producer, they need to be thinking, how can we work with brands and go out into this kind of this wider space rather than being trapped? And if you look at some of the advertising stuff, there's so many branded content examples. Penny, the German retailer, won an award this week for a 3-minute piece, which was telling the story of the emotional story of coming out of COVID. And it was a mother and a son, and it was the mother wanting to encourage her son to get back out and enjoy his life and experience youth. And it's as touching as a drama. Compared to some of the stuff I've seen in TV worlds, it was really moving. It's so cinematic. So there are certainly things they can learn, but they perhaps need to broaden their parameters and not think about, how am I going to get this 30-minute episode onto a broadcaster, they need to think, okay, I have production skills, I have creativity and storytelling. How can I work with brands, and then just go out into this, this, I don't want to say metaverse, but, digital universe.
Yeah. And also it's about tomorrow's consumers as well, isn't it? I mean, that's something coming back to the themes that we talked about corporate social responsibility. And you walk along the Croisette and you see, it's obviously about diversity, inclusivity, and also the environment and caring for one another and the planet as a whole. And that's something that certainly a lot of the brands are talking about. And the young consumers who've got the real spending power, their 18 to 30-year-olds, are really the ones that these brands have got to communicate with. And they're not watching TV anymore. They're going to be maybe watching Netflix on AVOD, but they're certainly watching YouTube, TikTok, Snapchat videos, Insta videos. So really, this is the new battleground, isn't it, for brands to communicate with their audiences on an emotional level?
Certainly. You had here, for example, Harris Reed, the fashion icon, visibly gender fluid. He's an amazing-looking guy. He has been taken on by an agency, Edelman, a big agency called Edelman, and they call him the ZEO. So he's the like the Gen Z reference for them. So to take someone from a completely different industry, understanding who he is, why he is who he is, plonk him into an agency, and suddenly the thinking changes completely. And of course it changes for all the work that comes out of there, and the message changes, and the tolerance and the diversity and all of that. There was a very interesting, a prize-winning ad that went out, which featured Indian girls in school passing little notes to each other, and the impression was that they were being naughty or cheating or whatever, but they were actually, it was giving little pieces of information to each other about menstruation. Because in certain cultures, this particular culture they were referring to, that girls aren't told about that. It's considered, you mustn't think about your body, or I don't know why they're not told about that. And this was so moving, so sweet and funny. And TV is often criticised for not doing enough on issues like this, diversity, the environment. And when they do the environment, it's just, lots of films of icebergs breaking and all that kind of thing. But you can tell these stories in a different way and engage people emotionally, still get the message across, but also entertain and move.
Like Julian says, I think he said it earlier as well, every touch point was hit this week. I mean, the founder of Me Too was here, Tarana Burke was here. You had Nikolai Coster-Waldau here, star of Game of Thrones, working with the UN Development Committee. You kind of just... Isa Meiger, a French actress as well, same kind of agenda. Every issue was dealt with in some respect, and it's because brands have really decided they need to take on this mantle of activism. There was a lot of talk this week that brands can have more influence than governments because governments are paralyzed, governments are not achieving things, whereas brands have a direct connection with consumers, and because of that, they're able to move the dial on things. It doesn't always happen. Sometimes it's just talk, but I mean, we have Malala. If Malala thinks it's worth coming here, then it does say something about the nature of the event and then the power. I mean, she referenced Apple in her session. There are brands that are helping shift the needle, and that's why this event should be important to TV.
And then, of course, there was real life demonstration here. Greenpeace demonstrated, disrupted the whole event. That was really just a kind of guerrilla version of the people inside the Palais who are desperately asking brands to change the message. If a brand, Nike or someone, says no more guns, people aren't going to say, "Oh, I'm a Republican," and so on and so on. Greenpeace was saying, "Right, all of you, you're all inside here. We know that.
Yeah.
Listen to us." It was disruptive. It caused chaos on the Croisette. There was a lot of police activity.
There's certainly the PR winners, I think, of this week in terms of making a statement around the world. And as we're speaking, we're just looking out over the bay, and there's the Greenpeace ship out there, which is moored here. So they've had a really
almost sort of piratical presence here. You know, they landed on the beach with a lot of kayaks on the WPP beach earlier this week. We've also had a can line returned by a former executive advertising exec who now works for Greenpeace and used to make ads for, I think it was VW and a lot of the fossil fuel companies or car makers. It's almost like people power coming to tell the industry, the advertising and the media industry, we demand change.
It's the whole thing coming to life, and it's brilliant. And I hope the Lions harness that and don't. I'm sure that there are a lot of good thinkers here, and I hope they don't just see it as, these people are disrupting our lives. I hope they bring them in and say, why are you disrupting our lives, and what should we do next? You know, I think that's how good demonstrations work, and that's how we should react to them.
And that's how brands work, should take notice of this, not necessarily be bullied into change, but you tend to find, I think you can feel that there's a public pressure, can't you?
Yeah. I mean, I agree with everything you've just said. I mean, I'm a big fan of Greenpeace, so I'm not going to castigate them for standing on the roof of the Palais. I mean, but equally, it is interesting that there are definitely examples of brands that have recognized that their self-interest can align with change. So one of my favorite campaigns of the week, which won a lot of awards, was the Hope Reef. And the Hope Reef was an initiative led by Sheba, a cat food. So the thinking here is we're a cat food, depleted fish stocks are bad for us because we need fish to make cat food. So they're thinking, how can we align that with a purpose? So what they did was they went to a dead coral reef in Indonesia, and they worked with experts to revive the coral reef. So in 2 years, it went from being 98% dead to being 70% alive. But what they did in the process was they regrew the coral reef in the shape of the word hope, this enormous word hope that could be seen from space. So that became a big PR campaign, and it was run on YouTube, and that enabled donations to be generated, which have allowed for this coral rebuilding program to be expanded around the world. So the coral's growing back, the fish populations have come back. So you have a far-thinking brand. You know, obviously it's rooted in self-interest. They want to sell more cat food. But in the process, if they manage to save the coral reefs and, you know, rejuvenate the fish population, it's ticked a lot of boxes.
Yeah. I mean, that's positive messages, and it's great for business as well. And I think that's the difference, isn't it? It's about aligning business interests with the environment and these key messages, and those shouldn't be mutually exclusive. Any brand, whether it's a TV business or whether it's an advertising business or an agency, you know, they need to be thinking about how they move the conversation forward, because we're in very different times now than pre-pandemic, and I think that's, you know, that really has changed the game.
And coming back to your earlier point, this is great content as well. I mean, some people are going to Hope Reef because they enjoy that content. So the half an hour they're spending in that world, they're not watching a Netflix episode, they're not watching a drama on BBC, you know. So brands sometimes are taking the storytelling initiative away. And one of the big messages this week, if you're a TV person, come to Cannes Lions and look at the work, because you will go away with 10 documentary ideas. You know, it's inspiring, some of the stuff you see down there. I mean, the Back Up Ukraine. I mean,
just about to mention that.
Talk about Back Up Ukraine.
It's essentially an app where people can install the app and archive images of broken or half-broken cities, buildings, roads, bridges across Ukraine for the future, for the rebuilding of the city. So this builds a massive archive. 3D scanning for when it can all be rebuilt again.
So culture is never lost. Culture is never lost because somebody had the forethought of just let's grab all of this imagery. And the other one, which won a lot of awards this week, was Vice. Now Vice, they're an interesting company because they straddle the TV world and the advertising world. So they're a model. I think we used to look at Vice a little bit as pretenders, didn't we, in the early days? But you know, they're doing some great work. And what they did this week, they created an augmented reality based app which allowed you to go into the British Museum. And when you look at the Rosetta Stone or the Parthenon marbles or all of these disputed items, you look at it through this AR augmented app, and instead of getting the official tour version, you get an unfiltered version of what really happened. How did that item get to the British Museum? And it's told by experts from the cultures that this stuff has been swiped from. So it's obviously slightly embarrassing as a Brit to talk about this, but you get a documentary. You're in there and you're getting documentary information on how these really important items ended up in the UK and why they should be repatriated back to their original places. Often they're raped and ripped from different countries. So these are great stories.
Yeah, they are. And the message that I'm getting from the youth market, so what are my observations of chats that we've had with various digital executives over the last few days, has been the thirst for truth, actually, from the youth audience. And they are getting their news and their information perhaps from very different sources to what maybe we did. That's why Vice is telling the stories that perhaps, the BBC might not tell, or ITV, or whatever national broadcaster. They're telling stories in an unvarnished way, which is, I think, again, really interesting. It's about that authenticity, which is becoming, very, very interesting and key for youth audiences. One last point I'd like to just finish on was I was having a look around Cannes and looking, where the TV companies, who's here and what are they doing and what's the relevance. And obviously, a lot of it here is their ad teams coming and meeting with clients, with brands, with media buyers, etc. So we've got Warner Brothers Discovery here. They've got a Shark Week beach installation, which is just in front of the Palais. We've got Roku here. Interesting, touching on what you talked about earlier, Julian, with Netflix. There's rumours around, maybe Netflix will buy Roku, or they're certainly maybe in discussions with them when it comes to, their advertising solution. Who else have we got here from a TV industry perspective that you've seen?
Well, off the top of my head, I can think RTL. I think RTL were here. Paramount came here to talk about the Star Trek franchise. They have Patrick Stewart down here. So there is definitely a smattering of people. And I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because Paramount at the moment are on a wave of trying to push their subscription service. So there's no question that sometimes they come, like Sarandos to some extent with Netflix, they come to push their agenda on, we're a subscription service and we create high quality content. But you cannot forget, this industry represents hundreds of billions of dollars of advertising money. And right now, with the subscription model the way it is, with all of these companies, there are just way too many of them out there attempting to get £6 or £7 a month, or $9-10 a month out of us. I mean, I'm already hooked into Disney, and I'm hooked into Netflix, and my wife insisted on getting BritBox, and I'm suddenly feeling like this is a lot of money that's going out of my pocket, and I'm still a Sky subscriber because I'm locked into their triple play offering. So Paramount, am I really going to spend another 6 or 7 on Paramount? So I think this whole notion of hybrid services with advertising tiers is going to be really important, and that's why TV companies are here. They want to talk advertising.
It's also because I think things have come full circle. 10 years ago, people were saying advertising is dead. It's not. TV advertising isn't dead, radio advertising isn't dead, press advertising isn't dead.
But it's digital advertising is very much alive.
It's very much alive. And apart from public broadcasting TV has always been funded by brands. Back in the day, back in the 50s, 40s, when it was the soap companies funding different programs, sports companies, newspapers, hence the expression soap opera. And they're back here, the huge companies that you mentioned, Warner Brothers and so on, because the brands are here. Yeah. And the agencies are here, and they know they're going to need them.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see, again, with all of these sort of macroeconomic issues that are happening, maybe we won't see subscription video and demand services in a year's time. Maybe they'll all be AVODs, who knows?
They'll be hybrids. They'll all be hybrids. Like Julian said it about 10 minutes ago, Netflix was implacable for years that it was a subscription service. I mean, you would never have got them to utter the word advertising, but 25% crash on the stock market, and you tend to change your tune a little bit, don't you? So they've changed their position. But as we've said all the way through, we're not talking just about TV spot advertising. The spot ad can be the hero, it can be the anchor of a campaign, but we're talking about experience, we're talking about funnels of communication. And these guys are, whatever you may think of this industry, they're geniuses at working out touch points, how to connect with people, through branded content, through digital channels, through packaging, through, so many different ways. And that's what this industry represents. And I think TV TV has always kind of looked a little bit at advertising as being a necessary evil, but actually the technical ingenuity here, the creativity, it's worth a look.
I think the strongest message here is that brands are superpowers, but that a lot of people here now want them to harness that superpower for good.
Well, that's a really interesting point to finish on. Julian, Andy, thank you so much for joining me. It's been a fascinating discussion. And the other thing to say is that people are wearing shorts. You don't see that much at MIPCOM and MIPTV, but all the execs are in shorts. I have to admit, I am too.
I've got a suit and tie on.
Guys, thank you so much. Really enjoyed speaking to you. And we'll see you in October for MIPCOM.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So our next guest on this week's Cannes Lions special show and the last episode in the current season is Alex Morris, Director of LADstudios at LADbible. Alex, great to see you. Great to see a friendly face here.
Yeah, Justin, it's been lovely. Hot and sweaty, but nice to be sat down with a beer.
We're in Mar Nolan's, which is, everybody knows who comes to Cannes. It's the HQ of many a journalist, many an exec for the weeks at MIPCOM and MIPTV. Seems to be the same, unsurprisingly, at Cannes Lions. So, Alex, tell us about what LADbible does down, because you're a regular here, aren't you? You come here regularly.
Yeah, and it's interesting, having been to Cannes Lions for a few years and obviously the various MIP conferences, they're quite different places, but there is some similarities. The big point of difference is that Cannes Lions is really driven by, advertising, brand partnerships. But now that kind of encompasses the wider publishing world, and particularly what interests me a lot whilst I'm here is the platforms themselves who are here in a big way. Twitter, Spotify, TikTok, Facebook, Snap are all a huge presence in Lions as they kind of really dominate the advertising landscape at the moment. For us, we come here in quite a large group actually, because it's a great opportunity to meet with our agency partners, our brand partners. Cannes Lions is slightly different. It's not such a kind of pitch-heavy festival where you're trying to walk away with a deal. It's about networking. It's about setting up opportunities. It's about building on relationships you already have and kind of finding new ways of working with each other. And, we've been spending our time here with our agency partners, with our platform partners, and it's been really positive. The other thing that's interesting with Cannes, you get an awful lot of Americans come for Cannes Lions. So for me, that's really useful. So many of the platforms have real senior execs in the US, and it means I don't have to do a trip around New York and LA, and I can see everyone here, and they really love it at Cannes, and sort of cut loose a little bit. I think, as we know, a lot of American clients love this sort of Southern European environment and a bit of rosé. So yeah, it's great. It means we can see a lot of a really diverse sort of partner and client set all in one place.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say the nature of the event as well, because it's not really a market, is it, in a sense? It's more, so for example, I just took a walk down to the bunker in the Palais, and instead of there being lots of different stands and lots of businesses doing presentations and everything, it's essentially one gallery of all the work, all the creative work done. So it's almost like an art gallery, and that's where all the judging goes on, and that's where which is obviously at the centre of the Festival of Creativity, which is about people being rewarded and recognised for their great work. So it's a very different crowd, and you're right, it's mainly American and UK attendees, isn't it? Not so many Europeans here.
No, it definitely is from my experience, and it's a good point. This started as a creative festival, really, rather than a market. So it is about the awards and celebrating creativity in the ad agency and ad industry, creative agency world, but it has evolved over the last few years, and even in the shorter time that I've been coming here, seeing that change from kind of, firstly it was dominated by the ad agencies, then it was dominated by publishers, and now it's dominated by platforms and social platforms and digital platforms. And so I think it is evolving, but I think you're absolutely right. That kind of creative piece is at the heart of it, and that sort of celebration of creative work, which is, yes, why it's probably less of a sales market and more of a kind of, networking and, social market in that sense.
It was very inspiring, actually, seeing a lot of this work that's been done. And we're talking to Andy and Julian earlier on in the show, and they were talking about some of the storytelling that brands have been doing, which is, quite remarkable. So I would imagine that, a lot of content creators might get something from actually coming here, really. If we're talking about more of the traditional end of the TV industry, perhaps, and digital publisher and producer such as yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's really at the forefront of a lot of the insights that are happening kind of creatively, because a lot of that at the moment is being driven by digital culture. And obviously, Cannes isn't just all about social platforms and social content, because obviously at the heart of it is, much of the content that exists across linear TV. So whether that be advertising or ad-funded productions, that plays a huge role in the kind of, Cannes Lions ecosystem. So yeah, it very much is a good place for content creators to kind of, keep abreast of what's going on in the world of content where brands or brand money is involved, basically.
As well as, obviously, the Croisette being packed all the way down to the Martinez with various stands and what have you, a lot of Lions happens up in the hills, doesn't it? Which we see bits and pieces of that at MIPCOM and MIPTV, but I was lucky enough to get invited to the LADbible House of Lad party the other night, which was fantastic. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. So I think, yes, there's lots of parties at MIP and so on, but Cannes Lions is quite famous for throwing big bashes. Everyone's keen on really cutting loose, and LADbible's no exception. And we've got a proud history of throwing quite fun, raucous parties over the last few years, and trying to make the Lad party a place to be, really, for our clients. So this year was no different. We had a really lovely villa up in the hills. We had Basement Jacks DJing, and it was great. It was so much fun. All our key clients, partners, colleagues. It was a really good place to be. We had a great night. It's a long party. It started at 8, finished at 2. So everyone did very well to keep going, and it was great. It did exactly what we needed to do, and we all enjoyed it a lot.
And you've just closed the seminar sessions at Lions as well with your keynote. Tell us a bit about what you were presenting.
Yeah, that was great. I mean, first time I've spoken here at Cannes Lions, and great to take the stage, and felt quite honoured that I was asked, and to be honest, a bit nervous as well. But actually, I really enjoyed it. And the session was called Lifting the Lid on How to Make Authentic Content for Social Platforms. And really it was all about the fact that we hear a lot that you need to make content that's authentic. Authenticity is a key factor in driving that engagement across multiple platforms, but unpacking a little bit of how you do that, why you do it, what does that actually mean. So we looked at actually a lot of detail at first around production styles, like shooting approaches, how to kind of bring platform appropriate shooting styles. We looked at post-production, and kind of using our kind of long history of working in social every day to kind of unpack some of the secret sauce for how we make social first content. And some of it was a bit techie around using platform tools, so on-screen graphics that platforms have inbuilt and things like that. And I really enjoyed it. It was nice to be able to talk about content from a structural and technical point of view, but also the creativity, because so much of what's happening in social is being driven by this kind of new short form content that was 1 minute under, and it was fun to play some videos showing some of the organic creativity that's happening in that space.
Yeah, well, it was fascinating. It was a packed house, lots of audience engagement and questions and stuff, so that was exciting. It'd be good to maybe to share something like that with the TV industry audience, because I'm sure there's a lot of learnings that producers and indeed networks will take a lot from that. Alex, I know you've got to rush for your plane now, so thanks so much for joining me. Great to see you here in Cannes. Have a safe flight, and see you again soon.
Yeah, thanks very much. It's been great. See you on the other side.
Well, that's it for this week's show, and indeed this third season of TellyCast. As always, I hope you've enjoyed listening to our conversations with TV's movers and shakers. We're taking a summer break now to recharge and refresh. Ready for our next season of shows, starting with an Edinburgh TV Festival preview on the 18th of August. I hope you all have a really relaxing summer. Until our next episode, stay safe.